Good morning, guys. Hope you can see the screen now.
Yeah,
Okay.
Karthik.
Okay. So today we are going to have some recap of like week before we were in the global Azure, and before that we started this data platform discussion. But we because data platform is huge topic, like we need at least 3-4 sessions. So today I'm just going to have some small recap for the data platform, and then we will again start doing some demos practically, like how it works, etc. So let me take you guys to the. I think you don't need introduction about our group and me. So I think the data platform, like as you all know, that the network storage compute is finished. I think in the compute area, I would like to cover some Kubernetes and container stuff, but the subject wise, it is currently finished. But the data platform is the one we want to focus on today. So moving to that, there are lots of modules. As I said, like we need like few sessions to cover up all the session and then the actual demo for each of the areas. And in this session, in this module, you will be covering all of the data related component. Like we were exploring SQL Server today, and the SQL Server the poll as well. So that we will talk about today. So the first item, like explore Azure Database analytical services, which we did before, but I will walk you through that again. And then we have a provisioning Azure SQL Database to store application data. Like we can create a one simple Azure SQL database, and then we can see how we can create a tables and how we can insert data. That we will explore today. And then we are going to talk about, like, discuss the scaling multiple Azure SQL database with the elastic pool. So this is another advantage that we will be discussing. And migrating your relational database, relational data stored in SQL Server to Azure SQL Database. Because I don't have the on-premises setup, we will not be testing that today, but I will see if I can do something, how we can leverage that and show us a demo. And but we will be discussing this part, like developing, configuring Azure ASP.NET application, and then configuring that with the SQL database. It's typically like a normal business use case, like everywhere we will be needed. Like if you're working on a front end, how you connect to the backend database and then retrieve the data, that we will be testing. So let me. So I think previously we discussed, right? So when it comes to data platform, it can have a normal relational database or a transaction applications or some big data related use cases. So always you need to remember these three items: velocity, variety, and volume. Velocity is you have a large amount of data keep coming, and you need to receive that. For that, like if you have like a millions of data coming, you need some sort of mechanism to receive the data and put it in your data platform and then process it. So for that you need an event hub. This is the Azure component will help you to retrieve the data in a large scale, and then the what are the data you are retrieving, you can either put it into data lake or directly process through stream analytics. This is another Azure component. The stream analytics in the live, for example, if you have million data coming on the same live data, you can run a query and that will give you a report. So stream analysis is the main use case for running a query against the live data. But in the normal use cases, like in the companies, like if you work in the some sort of like a bank, retail companies, where they will have use cases like some structured data, semi-structured data, which they wanted to bring it to the system. So normally, like data factory, it is used as an injection tool, where you can bring the data from other sources to data platform. Once you are bringing the data into your Azure Data Lake, this can be like you use factory to bring the data as an injection layer and then put it into your data lake and then process it. The data you are placed in the data lake, you can use Databricks It is more of like a data science component, like the cluster model. If you wanted to process some data, which are like, for example, you have a large amount of relational data, you wanted to process it to get the ETL and then get the final summary data. To do that, you may need some sort of like a cluster. Like if you have a single server to process that, your data is very huge and your processor is small, then you can't process it. So you need in the runtime, you need a clustered model where you can perform your ETL, but automatically, like depend on your request or demand, the clusters can add more data, more servers. Like Databricks can automatically add like one to many databases, like process servers that can handle your data. Once the processed data can go into SQL Server or a Cosmos DB, and then from there you can visualize to either Power BI or application. So this is the typical use case of the um, data analytical platform, or you call it like in the modern days people use DNA, data and analytical platform. So this pretty much you are now understanding the high level how the data analytical platform works. And in the Azure, you have various Azure SQL, Azure databases, which whatever the industry is needed today, everything is available in Azure. You can see from here, this we have discussed a couple of weeks before, like you have Azure SQL Database for relational database, and you also can use your managed instance, like a dedicated component you can provide that can go into your um, virtual network. So you can also create a managed instance, and you can also create your own SQL server on the virtual machines. You install the Windows Server software OS, and then top of that you can install SQL Server. But in this one, it is IaaS model, but the first two are PaaS model. And then if you have a demand or a use case to use PostgreSQL or MySQL, MariaDB, all the three type of databases are available. Also, you have a globally distributed guaranteed performance or low latency. You have a great functionality like Cosmos DB, which can give you wider benefit. Also, you have the cache model. Like if you are working on a in-memory database, then you can use cache for Redis. And the database migration service is mainly for use to migrate your on-premises content to cloud or cloud to cloud. You can use database migration service. And finally, you also have a managed instance for Apache Cassandra. So these are the type of databases products available in Azure. So as I mentioned, like you will need to understand what is the difference between managed instance and normal SQL database or elastic pool. Here in the managed instance, you can have your own SQL agent to perform, but whereas in here elastic database job. And another main difference is like the database limit. Here in the managed instance, you have up to 100 databases you can create, whereas in the normal SQL DB, Azure SQL DB, you can have only single database. If you're working on application, for example, if you're working on Azure SharePoint on premises or TFS on premises, where typically you need a backend SQL server. For that, you can't use Azure SQL DB, whereas you can use Azure SQL managed instance, because TFS Team Foundation server or a SharePoint server need a multiple databases. For that, we can't use Azure SQL DB. We can use managed instance. This is recently they start supporting. And in the elastic pool, you can have a group of resources can be consumed in the elastic pool. You can have more than one database in this elastic pool. That's what we are going to discuss today. So I think this slide will come back. So in the elastic pool, like typically when you are creating a database, and the database is given with some sort of like a PaaS resource pools, resource either a CPU or a memory. But in the elastic pool, you have a you can create an elastic pool as a logical grouping, and then you can add more than one database. So when you add more than one database, all the group level, you can manage the resources. Like instead of creating on the individual database level, you can manage for the group level. For example, in the Microsoft example, they have given like a fitness company, and they have initially started when they keep growing, they will be launching a new branches, new franchise. So everyone wanted to get their data, analysis data, like your fitness centers. Every fitness person, their performance are tracked, and then they put it. For example, Milton Keynes has a branch. They need a Milton Keynes specific database, and then London or Birmingham. So you have a different database for a different region. And if you keep growing your number of databases, for example, London, maybe Monday to Friday, people will be working there and they may be more crowded. Whereas in the weekends, in the London, maybe like a less usage, maybe they'll be moving to their another region to work on. So the performance is usage is different for different timeline, different region as well. So when you have like a different type of usage needed, then simply you can have a group of databases into elastic pool. Elastic pool level, you can assign the resources. So if we have a 5 database, one database heavily used, but the 4 are not used, what you will be, if you are creating individual database, normally you assign, for example, like individual database level, like a 2 CPU or 20 GB RAM, then five database, you are increasing like a total 5 into 2 GB, like you have a like 10 core, and then 100 GB RAM you are going to utilize. But instead of creating individual database level, you create something like a pool where the databases are not needed, or some databases are required resources. They can share the workloads instead of creating individual level. So that is the main advantage going with elastic pool, that we will see in the practical demo. And that allocation, the performance and costing, you have a two different variety, like a DTU or a vCore model. As I mentioned, like DTU is like based on bundle measure of computer storage or IO resources. For a simple package needed, then pre-configure resource option available in DTU model, which is basic, standard, and premium model. Whereas in vCore, it is logical CPU offered with the type of hardware and software is needed, and it also gives the flexibility and control over individual resource consumption. So you can design like what kind of memory you needed, what kind of storage you needed, what kind of storage category you needed. You can select it. It is available in the general purpose or business critical service tier, 2 tier of available. So quickly, I'm going to show you guys like how that practically look like. So if I just go to the portal.azure.com, so if I wanted to create elastic pool, you can just go to SQL elastic pool and create a new one. At the time of creating new one, you can say like, what is your resource group name? And I say the elastic pool new, and I created my resource group. And at the time of creating, it's also asking what is my elastic pool name. So I'm going to say new.
Karthik, elastic pool, if I have to consider, we consider cluster of databases.
Not as a cluster of databases. For example, when you create a one SQL Azure SQL database, you are allocating some resources for that, right? So, for example, like if you are because it's a PaaS services Microsoft managing, but individual database needed some sort of RAM or some sort of like a processor, CPU you need, CPU and memory and storage. These three is needed for your SQL to run. What will happen, like if you allocate CPU, memory, and resources to a SQL database, and you already paid for that, but what if you wanted a if you want to manage like 100 sub database? So if you have like a 50 database, are you willing to create a 50 times resources? you wanted some sort of like a grouped resources, like it is technically not as a cluster model, but like you create a 100 CPU, 100 RAM, and then 100 GB storage, right? So you have allocated for the group level, but within the group, you can have 100 database. 90 database doesn't need any resources always, but 10 database always ups and down. Like Monday, one database needed higher resources, another day another database needed.
Okay, understood. Okay.
So
Yeah, if I have to understand the table in the database, if I consider those database tables or the database as a separate, and then CPU and RAM as a separate, and then CPU RAMs are clubbed. That's what you're saying. So that group, so that it can be effectively or optimally used.
Yeah, some database need high resources on Monday, but not the next day.
Okay.
Okay. So in those kind of model, you can go with elastic pool, but elastic pool is not going to satisfy all the need. It is only needed where you have in the fitness center example, like if they have 100 center, 100 database are in the elastic pool, but not all the elastic databases needed high resources. Because like some places people don't turn up and they don't need a high utilization, but some are needed high utilization. So basically you are actually sharing the resources for multiple database. That is the simple answer.
Okay.
So
Thanks. Thank you.
in this one, we are just simply creating elastic pool, and then say like you need to provide the server name. Either you can select the existing one or you can create the new one. So what I'm going to do in this, instead of creating like this, first I will show you some example where what I'm doing here. So first I'm creating some variables here, like what is my admin, what is my password, and then what is my resource group. So here I'm going to say new, and this is the new resource group, and server name 02. And in this command I'm going to execute. When I execute this, this will create a SQL server name, SQL server 002. And once this is created, I'm going to create the SQL database called fitness Vancouver DB and Paris DB, two different DB. And then finally we can create elastic pool and assign these two databases into that elastic pool. Okay, so we'll go back and simply create a managed shell, cloud shell. So once it's loaded, I'm just executing some variables. Okay, okay, so all my variables are executed. Now I can use these variables in the command. So my first command is mainly to create a database called 002, and also look for a resource group. I think if resource group is not exist, then it will throw the error. So it says that I don't have the resource group. So first I'm going to another portal. Simply I create a resource group, which will say like RG underscore what is the name we give? SQL underscore elastic pool new. Just create. Yep. So the name is created. Now I go back to my command. If I use the same command again, now it will execute, and the outcome will be listed out here, and it will show me what are the configurations we used here. That will display here. I think you are following, right? First I'm creating one SQL server, And once you create the SQL Server, then you can create more than one database. And then all the database we wanted to allocate into a pool so that we can manage the resources. Normally it will be faster, but today it's taking time. Okay, so the server is created. Now we can see this is the server name, the full extension with the domain fully qualified name, and all the basic configuration displayed here. So now the next step, since I have created my SQL Server, I'm going to create some two databases. So select, I'm passing the same parameters. Sometimes it is confusing. This command is in the different. Okay, so I create. So fitness Vancouver database is going to be created. It's a blank database. Before the session, I was trying to set up some sample website where we can enter some data. The data can store it in the database, but I had some problem with that. So maybe like I will show you the way how we configure our database connection, but the actual demo, maybe in the next week, I can make it work and show you the full demo. So today the focus is we create some SQL Server database and see how we can create a table and insert it. That one step, one demo we'll see. And then we will create a server with a multiple database and then create a SQL pool and assign the databases to the SQL pool so that we can see how we can controlling the backend memory of your resources like a CPU, memory, and the storage. So now we created one Vancouver database. So similar way, I am going to run the command. I hope you're also following the command. That is very simple, easy command. SQL DB create, and then you are passing the resource group name, and then server name which we created in the first step. Then you are actually simply saying what is the name of the database. You can go back to the home resource group, and this is the new. Within our resource group, you can see the SQL Server 002 we created, and the Vancouver database is already added. Now it is loading, creating the Paris database. Once this is created, we can allocate that into, like we can create a SQL pool and allocate it. I think by the time we finish the demo, the session will be close to the 45 minutes. So in case anybody wanted to discuss any points, I will rejoin the same session once it is closed. So if anyone has any questions, we can discuss that.
Okay, Karthik, yeah, sure.
Okay, so now we got the new database, like two database created. So if I just simply go here and refresh. Yeah, so Paris DB and Vancouver DB, 2 DB we have. but these two databases are not assigned to the elastic pool. So now I'm just going to so I go to the home and then look for SQL elastic pool, which is here. Once I logged in here, then I click new. So here I can select my existing, because the database is in the new resource group, which I selected, and then I'm going to give my elastic pool name. So I'll say new elastic pool, and the SQL server name, which we created 002 to display zero. Sometime like when before this session, I was playing around with some example, but the server name what we created as a fitness SQL server 002, sometimes it takes time to visible here. That's why we are not seeing the 002 here. So probably like we wait for some time and come back. But the previously one created 001 is actually visible here. So probably like I'll give you some 5 minutes and then we'll come back here to see how we do that. Meantime, let's try again. No. I think this is something I need to report to Microsoft, why it is not immediately displaying when we create the elastic pool. So previously I created one elastic pool where you can see like in the configuration, like first I go to overview, where you can see this is my old resource group and the server name is 001, and within that I have my databases. So configure. So here this currently consuming vCore model. As I mentioned, like there are two type of allocation for the resources. One is vCore, another one called DTU. So the DTU, as I mentioned, like basic, standard, premium, three different model you have. We can select one of this, or if you don't want the DTU model, then simply you can go for a vCore model. So in the vCore, you can allocate like I wanted a six vCore, and then you can also say like I need a 500 GB or 600 GB RAM. So you have an option to select what type of resources you want to allocate. The default one currently you can see here like generation 5 up to 80 vCore supported. So this way the elastic pool you can allocate with the DTU model or vCore model, and then you can simply save by increasing or decreasing depending on your performance need. And you can also see the current prices here. If it is a vCore, what is the cost for, and if I select like a DTU model also showing here like I am selecting DTU 250 and then I say 100 GB data size, then the prices are displayed here. Click cancel. The same way you can, the database allocation also same here. You can go to databases and add databases. Previously, if you create any database, you can select and apply. So I already applied in this sample like fitness and Vanco. These two databases are assigned to this elastic pool. Also, if you are assigned like 50 of databases, you can see like which database is highly consuming your CPU and which are in the peak percentage. Both you can see here. So let's see again whether the database is displaying now. No, still not displayed. It takes some time. So normally, like in the previous step, we created a SQL server and two databases. When we go into elastic pool creation, you select the same resource group and assign the name of the elastic pool, and then you select your SQL server name. Since my 002 is not displayed here, I'm going to skip it, but you can understand once it is available, you can select your SQL Server name and then create. Once you create it, you will see a page like this, SQL Elastic Pool, where you can configure your the resources, as well as you can allocate the database. If you want to add a new database, you can select database name and then apply. So this is the I think by this we are completing the SQL pool database demo. I think the session will end in 7 minutes, but quickly I want to show something. So if I go to like the inserting, how we access, I think last week before we discussed that, right? I think simply go to my database, one of the database, SQL Server. Right. Okay, I have another one database. So I go to my SQL database where I have a query editor, and I say like my password. Once I enter my password, I can see my query editor. Like once you created a SQL database, how you check your tables, views, store procedure. In the left hand side, you can see all your tables. So I have a like if you want to see like select from the course data and then I run it. So right now I don't have any row. So for example, let me just insert into course the table name and values. Since I know like only two columns, I'm going to say ID 001. The value will be like a sample. So I'm going to insert this row, insert one row affected, and the same table if I try to execute. So now we can see the course ID and the course name. So this, like you can create a simple database and then you can use this query editor for managing your database or inserting or creating new tables, views, or store procedure. All the functionality, instead of using a SQL Server Management Studio in the local, you can use query editor for managing your database or performing your syntaxes here. So going back to I think the basic the topics we covered till now. One is like exploring Azure Database Analytical Service. We have gone to the high level, and then creating a new SQL database and storing your data. You can store data like how I did through query editor, the same way you can do with the PowerShell or SQL Server Management Studio, or you can use a Cloud Shell. So all the options are available to insert. And then you can also see the third one we discussed today, scaling multiple SQL database into a single elastic pool. So we created a single elastic pool and added two databases to that. And then migrating database we'll discuss once we have the sample. And the fourth one, developing and configuring the ASP.NET. As I mentioned, like I completed the setup, but there is small error. So I couldn't show you today, but I'll cover that next week. Okay, so let me try the last one more time again. So I go to Elastic Pool, new one. Still not yet visible. Because it took like nearly like 30-40 minutes to display. I don't know why Microsoft is not resolving this. Okay, so I think for today, I will stop the demos here. And in case if anyone have questions, we can go through that.